where I'm going with this is that as part of this investigation, I rang the federal government agency in Washington to ask how many children went missing every year in America.
Great question, yeah.
They told me they didn't keep the figures. They could tell me how many cars went missing, apparently, but they couldn't tell me how many children went missing. They said I would have to ring every state because they only kept the records at a state level. But certainly then, that's what they told me. I must have got to 9 or 10 states, Rich, including California, before I stopped, because the figure was absolutely friggin' fantastic by then.
Tens of thousands. I remember you telling me.
Hundreds of thousands.
Hundreds of thousands. I remember you telling me.
And it's like, what? And that doesn't mean they all go missing, never to be found. Some of them are found. They're here, there, or wherever. Vast numbers of them are not found. And this is the public perception which needs to change. And I completely understand why this perception is held by people. They judge the number of children that go missing by the number of missing children stories on the mainstream news, in the mainstream media. So Madeleine McCann is a big story, yeah. Madeleine McCann is the tip of the tip of the tip of the tip of the tip, and I could go on for hours, of the iceberg. But the vast majority of these kids that go missing are never appearing in the mainstream media. Overwhelming. Only a few ever do, the high-profile cases. They go missing and they're never seen again. Vast numbers. And I talked to Credo Mutwa, the shaman, the Zulu shaman in South Africa. Same happening there. Children just disappear. It's unbelievable the number of children that go missing every year in this world. And it's all connected to what I've just described. And when you look, because everything connects to everything else, when you look at the way the laws are changing, the way the behavior of social services, not just in this country, but in America, elsewhere, is changing, so that they're now taking more and more and more children from loving parents, and the state is taking control of them. When they're now introducing laws in Britain about emotional abuse, which is not defined. So actually, grounding someone, a kid, for doing something that's not acceptable can easily be called emotional abuse in this context.
Yeah.
These laws are all being brought in for one simple reason alone: to give more and more reasons for the state to take away children from loving parents. And I tell you this, people, if you don't think this is your problem and you've got kids, well, I should have another think, because I would hate the knock to come on your door when it's too late.
10,000 a year.
We've got to stand together here and stand up for these families that are having their children taken away from loving parents. And the reason we have secret courts where the media is not allowed to report these cases is not to protect the child, it's to protect the system from stealing children. And there are some journalists like Christopher Booker in the Telegraph in this country who've done some fantastic work exposing this against tremendous pressure of the courts dictating what he can and cannot say, or they'll prosecute him. This is what's going on in the world while we're watching fricking X Factor. This is what's going on in the world while we're watching all these diversions and celebrities and all these bloody reality shows. This is what is going on. This is what is happening to our children. And anyone's got respect for children, including their own children, off the arse, let's get started. And let's get this information circulating big time. Take this interview, for instance. Send it everywhere. Let's get people aware that the world is not like they thought it was. Because I would rather they found out while we still have time to change it, and don't find out when the knock comes on their door and it's too late.
I just want to say a couple of things. There's been a number of people who have emailed and said that they used to think the dark energies and the archons, they used to think that was very fantastic. But they've come to believe that you're definitely more than onto something when you talk about that. A lot of people have said that. In the interest of balance, William in Spain said that he thinks that at this point, this is where it loses a bit of credibility. That's William in Spain. But a lot of people, I mean, I used to think...
Can I just say something, Richie?
You can. Go ahead.
Right. One of the greatest forms of suppression is the suppression of people's perception of the possible. If you can squeeze their perception of the possible, then you can operate outside that perception of the possible, and you can do all the things that I'm saying, all the things happening that I'm saying, but people will dismiss it because it's outside the bounds of their programmed sense of the possible. When I first came out and said all this paedophilia was going on and involved the Thatcher government, it involved all these people, all those years ago, people laughed and said, that's ridiculous. This is where, mate, you lose your credibility. Now it's coming out. And it's not the fact that this stuff with the archons and what have you and all this stuff I'm talking about is not happening. It's the fact that so many people are so programmed from cradle to grave with a minute sense of the possible that they cannot perceive it's possible. There's a big lesson here. Just because you can't perceive it does not mean it's not happening.
You're living proof.
We are learning that lesson so big time now as this lid comes off.
You're living proof of it. I mean, I talk to people all the time who, I mean, we met so many youngsters in London. I say youngsters, 20-somethings, late teenagers who said, you know, I'm really into what's happening. I've read some of your books. I've looked at the films. It's making sense to me. I've done my own research. I would have said it. I think the first time we ever spoke on the radio, I think I kind of semi-rudely said, look, I don't want to get into all that other stuff. Let's talk about the money and the bank and all that sort of thing. And you, being you know, politely said, yeah, okay, let's get into all of that. Of course, I'm in a very different place now, and I'm happy to be there in terms of I totally and utterly understand it and believe that that's exactly what's happening. It's staggering to me that people can't see it now. You know, and I love one of the emails that just came in. I've just lost it off my screen now. And again, it was somebody saying, I believe what David is saying because of the scale of it. You can't just get that many people around the world who are just into interfering with kids just because they're getting off on sexual kicks. Exactly. It just can't be. And that person is right. Yeah.
And see, when you read like this MP man today and others, and you read victims and what they say, they're saying like these paedophile parties at Dolphin Square next to Parliament. They're saying they didn't even try to hide it. They didn't even try to hide themselves, and they just were kind of open about it, you know, in these parties. And the reason they were so open about it in the way that these victims describe is because they know that the system is so stitched up in terms of their kind, their network being in control of law enforcement and government and media and all of this, that they can almost flaunt it in a way. But what they didn't bargain for was people outside of the mainstream system who were going to grab them by the tail and refuse to let go. That's what they didn't bargain for. And now it's starting to come out and they're running for cover. Well, there ain't a cover big enough, ladies and gentlemen. It's coming out and the game's going to be up, and we must not let this go away. You know, what was that, quote I used at Wembley, something like when we've exhausted every possibility, let's get started.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. Let's come together here and put down our differences, whether we believe this or believe that, whether you see it like that, put it down. There are vast numbers of children being abused, tortured, and murdered. I love it. You know, this week the police are investigating a possible murder involving this political paedophile ring. A murder. My goodness me, the scale is fantastic, and they can cover it up because of all these things. In fact, there was a a paedophile in Australia, not a paedophile, well, he might have been, but he was a Satanist in Australia. And before he died, he produced a document, not apologizing for Satanism, but actually flaunting it. And this is what he said. I've got a quote here about the abuse of children. He said, politicians are introduced by a carefully graded set of criteria and situations that enable them to accept that their victims will be, quote, our little secret. Young children sexually molested and physically abused by politicians worldwide are quickly used in sacrifices. In Australia, the bodies are hardly ever discovered, for Australia is still a wilderness. Now, our little secret. This is one of the things they do, and this is what intelligence people were doing in North Wales as well. You get these politicians involved in sex with children, you film it secretly, and that politician will then pass any law you want for the rest of his or her political career.
Bought and paid for. Do you know what?
And paid for. Ted Heath was one of those. And this is why you get politicians doing things that appear to be against everything they've ever stood for. It's because if they don't, it comes out. So they do it. And this paedophilia is another aspect, a very important aspect, Rich. The use of blackmail is another way that politics is stitched up by the hidden hand.
And we saw that in the Franklin scandal. We're out of time. Look, we'll get back into these issues again, maybe in the new year, maybe not so early in the new year. You've got things going on. I want to thank you for your time, mate. Not just for me, but
Pleasure,
from the hundreds and hundreds of messages we've got coming in tonight. Many of them have said that they want to thank you personally for what you've done. A lot of so-called alternative media people trying to act all big and bad in the last few years, like they're on top of this issue. No, they're not. I said this on Friday night. You've been talking about this for over 25 years. I'm in your debt, mate, and so is everybody else. Thanks very much.
It's a pleasure, Rich. Always a pleasure to talk to you, mate. And I'm so glad for the opportunity to put some pieces together so the picture can be seen. And